All right. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us on this beautiful Saturday. At least here it's pretty nice and bright. Cold, but it's nice and bright. So thank you all for joining us. It's definitely a pleasure being joined with you again. Thank you to those of you that attended the session last week. We had a very, very good session, I would say, on personal branding. There was a participation of one particular lady, Wendy, which was pretty good. She served as our case study, and it was a session that I would say that I'll definitely use that and as an example going forward. So for today, we're going to touch on imposter syndrome. Some of you might have heard about it. Some of you might have experienced it. I'll actually say most of us have experienced it. Sometimes we don't give it a name. So today we'll touch on that. We'll talk about what the definition is, and then we'll talk about the causes, and we'll try and figure out what are the strategies and you know, things that we can use to overcome the imposter syndrome. For those of you that don't know me, I am Sonia Silva. I am the director of Standard Chartered Bank here in New York. I lived in London for almost 18 years, and then moved to New York 2.5 years ago. I'm a leader of several operational teams, and I thoroughly enjoy leadership as a subject matter. I am also the founder and director of an initiative called For Women by Women, which is in essence an initiative to empower women, youth through education. I think it is really important that we share our experiences, lived experiences, and is a way of also empowering the ones to come. I have a motto which says, you know, when you reach a certain level of prominence, or when you reach a certain level of success, it is important that you send the elevator back down for others to ascend. That is how I normally live any sort of experience that I have, and I share it with pretty much everyone that I mentor. Now, I'll pause you in case there are any questions before we delve right into the session. Okay. I would like to ask you all to try as much as you can to participate in today's session. I think it's important that we make it interactive and share, right? And thoroughly go through everyone's experiences and see how much can we learn from one another. Now, I'll ask the participants in the room to look at this image and give me a 1 word, 2 words. How would you describe the image that you see in the screen at the moment? Anyone would like to have a go? Should I pick on someone?
Hello.
Hi there.
So I see a happy woman.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, she seems successful and happy. Yeah.
Thank you. That's pretty good. Anyone else?
I see a woman who has, firstly, I have noticed her workspace is in order, it's clean. And then I move my focus to the person I see on the picture. And both of them fits very well together. She is well taken care of. She's taking care of herself and a business, and is very much in control of where she is and what she's doing.
Spot on. Pretty good. Thank you. Anyone else? Prince, as the one of the few guys in the session today, how would you describe this image?
I'll describe it the same way the 2 other participants have described it. Maybe just what they haven't said. I see a lady smiling with a mug in her hand, and on her side by the window there is there's a building there. It looks like Yeah, that's utopia then. Yeah.
Okay. So very observant. So thank you all for your contribution. What I do see in this image is very similar to what was described by our two colleagues in the room. I do see a woman that projects success. I do see a woman that comes across as being sure of herself, quite assertive in the way that she's sitting down, the way that she's positioning herself. You can see, and I also agree, that she's in a surrounding that looks like an office, right? So she also portrays the image of someone that potentially could be leading a function, could be leading a company, could be leading teams, right? Someone that it's what the younger generation call it, a boss lady, right? That's what I see in this image. Now, the reason why I wanted us to start with this is so that we all can delve into the whole notion of imposter syndrome. Why does it exist, right? Why do people have this imposter syndrome or talk about this imposter syndrome? Now, let's move on to the actual definition of imposter syndrome, and then we'll talk about the potential causes of the same. Imposter syndrome, and I'll start with it, it's not a medical condition. It's not a disease. It's not anything to do with you having a condition that needs a doctor to fix it, right? In layman terms. Imposter syndrome is truly a feeling, right? A feeling of inadequacy, a feeling of not belonging somewhere, a feeling of I will be caught. I'm in a position that I didn't deserve. I am in a room that I wasn't supposed to be, and I will be caught. People will find out that I am a fraud, right? It is a sentiment. It is a feeling that only you have and only you can experience and feel it. Now, the reason why I said about the feeling of not belonging in the room, I am talking about women, men, everyone, right? That have, for example, a role to play. Could be in your professional life, could be as a mother, could be as a father, and you still have this feeling of, I am not good enough. Often we see minorities feeling like this. Why? Because for a number of years, they've been conditioned to think that way, right? And I'll tell you for a fact, imposter syndrome is something that most of us would have experienced or continue to experience in our professional and personal life, including celebrities, including a lot of the public figures such as Michelle Obama, for example, Oprah Winfrey. These are successful women, and I'm quoting them just because I love the two of them. But these are women that are successful, and in our eyes, the ones that are externally viewing them, we think, wow, they are successful. Why would they be feeling or having this feeling of not belonging, this feeling of inadequacy, this feeling of I am a fraud, and they will be finding out that I shouldn't have this role, or I shouldn't be seen as how I'm being seen at the moment. So for me, I'll summarize it by saying that imposter syndrome, it is a feeling of not belonging, right? And I'll use myself as an example so I can give you something tangible. When I started working in banking, I had the notion, investment banking, at Bank of New York Mellon, JP Morgan. I worked for all these big American banks, and I felt it that I didn't belong there, right? Not because I wasn't competent. I just felt like, oh my God, this is usually a space that is occupied by Caucasians and men. So I was literally ticking the box for two things. I was female and I was Black, still Black. In that space, I was just like, I don't belong here. So I was constantly, and I still am to date, no matter how successful people think I am, I still think that way. A lot of times when I enter certain rooms, I'll be the only female. Oftentimes, I'll be the only Black female in a room full of CEOs or COOs, directors as well. And I'm having this notion of, oh my God, I am not good enough to be here. And it's not because someone said something to me. It is a self-inflicted feeling that I caused on myself, right? I'm going to pause here in terms of the definition. And again, there's so many ways of defining it, but my way is, this is a feeling. This is a notion of. It is not a medical condition. It is usually experienced by most of us, men and women, that we don't belong in a certain space. I'm just going to pause if there's any questions or clarifications needed on the definition before we move on to causes.
I need to just say, you just triggered some situation which I had to deal with in machinery business as the production line, as a Black woman, and most of the women who works in this space, I do live in Germany, they're more like dressed as a man, half man, you know, and half woman. And somebody walk into my office and they see a well-dressed woman with long fingernails and being 100% woman, being in this space, and certain situations where men walk in and say, who the hell are you to be there in this space? And sometimes there was a few situations I threw them out of my office, yeah, irrespective of who they were, because they were disrespectful. But also the feeling I got was a lot of anger, that I make myself feel bad because of the situation that I just had to deal with.
And did you call it that? Did you give it that name of imposter syndrome?
No, I didn't even use the word, because I don't use the word. I speak 90% German every single day. Now that I'm on Clubhouse, I speak English more.
Nice.
But I didn't even use the word imposter because I was just angry. I would know the word that came out was angry at myself, that this situation made me angry, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And again,
I'm so glad we're doing this today. Thank you, Prince, for saying, please come in. Oh, thank you. This is like good.
No, and you know, and thank you so much, Cornelia, for sharing this. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Often we don't give it a name. We don't pinpoint, or we actually enable to pinpoint what is it, right? Because we just feel like, why is this person questioning my ability or my looks, my physical looks? Because I'm in a room, I'm in a space that usually belongs to men, usually belongs to nationals of a certain country. We experience, and I always say to people, imposter syndrome isn't black and white, always a thing of men versus women. It's not a thing about just race. It's a combination of things, right? And you need to be able to identify that and have those strategies to deal with them. In very layman terms, you need to talk to yourself, because it's a feeling. It's something, it's a voice, right? It's that bully voice in your head saying those things to you, that, oh my God, you don't belong here. You're in a room full of people that are, oh my God, way more senior than you. They speak in a more articulate manner than you, and you start having those conversations with yourself. So in the course of the presentation, you'll see what I mean about some of the strategies that I personally have been using to overcome that imposter syndrome that keeps on, that voice that keeps on nagging me. Any other thoughts or comments? Thank you, Cornelia. Okay, we'll delve into the causes. Now, the causes could be a combination of different things, right? Could be limiting self-beliefs, right? Limiting self-beliefs in essence. Could be due to your personality, how you are, the introvert versus extrovert. Could be your social condition, where you're raised, how you're raised, your religious beliefs, for example. A lot of these aspects, they are factors that contribute to this imposter syndrome, this feeling that at times we have. Could also be your childhood experiences. And I'll say this with a pinch of salt. For those of you that are African, you grew up in an African household, we know that our parents back in the day, and a lot of them still today, feel that kids should not be in a room or in a table with adults. Kids do not have a voice, right? They feel like is top down, is what I say, you do. So if you were raised in that kind of environment, you will have that experience that says it's hierarchical. Therefore, if someone is more senior than I am, yes, I'll give them the respect that they deserve, but it means that I don't have a voice, right? So you have to pinpoint or try and pinpoint what's making you behave in a way that you do, what makes you lower your voice, right? Because you are in front of someone that is more senior than you are. Could be down to that childhood trauma, and often we talk about these things in a loose way. Oh, it could be a trauma. No, give it more credit, because truly it could be a trauma that no one is unlocking. Because again, in our African culture, we are taught to go, 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 go. No one is going to stop to talk about, oh my God, this has happened to me. It's not a pity party. We have to keep on going, because this is how we've been conditioned to think and behave, right? So I focus a lot on childhood experiences, because I myself had my own childhood experience, which affected the way I am, affected the way I am so competitive. I am constantly trying to, so if I hit a goal today, for example, I don't stop and dwell on it. I'm like, okay, what's the next one? Keep on going. I don't stop to celebrate those accomplishments, or didn't. Now I'm working on it, I would say. But that is very important, and it's something that you need to try and deal with by going deeper into that, having those open and honest conversations. You don't have to choose to go, for example, to a psychologist today, but find someone that you can have open conversations with and try and figure out, why am I reacting like this? Why is my voice so low? Why is it that I don't, stand on my feet and challenge something? And why is it that I feel like when I'm in the room with senior people, with male, I shouldn't have a voice? So have that sort of exercise to try and understand a little bit more about your childhood experiences. And then the cause of it, which is very aligned to what I'm saying, is if you're going through anxiety or depression, that is an enabler for you to have that imposter syndrome kick in, right? When you are about to go into a stage or a meeting and you're about to present something, that voice starts nudging and saying something, right? And you're combating it. That could be it. It's because you are anxious, because you fear public speaking, right? And I think we had a session, the one we had last week, we're talking about fear of something, and public speaking was certainly one of them. Think about it that way. If you are anxious because you're about to enter a room and be in front of hundreds of people, even if it's just 10 people, that anxiety will trigger the imposter syndrome, and you will think, oh my God, that's it. They will discover that I shouldn't be here. I'm not good. I shouldn't be leading these teams, right? That could be it. Depression is a very serious condition. Again, like I said, I am not a medical expert. I am not a psychologist, but there's an element of my role in trying to understand my directs, my team. So I do exercise that, and obviously guide them to speak to professionals. Depression could also be a trigger of the imposter syndrome, right? That you're constantly doubting yourself, even though you are good at what you're doing, right? And what causes depression? Several things can cause that, right? But it's something, once again, you need to seek the professional help if you feel that you are depressed or getting to that. And sometimes we don't even notice that. We don't acknowledge it because of that go, go, go mentality, right? And the last piece that I wanted to mention about something that can cause the imposter syndrome to kick in is the struggle that we tend to have, a lot of us, in finding our sense of purpose, right? The sense of, why am I here, right? What is Sonia's essence? What am I meant to be doing? on this planet? What is my purpose in life? Is my purpose in life just to work and get paid? No. I discovered my purpose, and I know that my purpose is to share with others. Any experience that I go through in life, I like to share them. That's why I founded this platform. That's why in my current job in banking, I mentor the younger generation. That's why I give my time freely to others to share what I've learned, because I think it could help someone else. So I found my purpose through an exercise that I had to do, right? In trying to figure out, who am I and what can I give back? And also, if I'm in a position where I can give back, I should give back. That is my sense of being. That is my sense of, I found my purpose and this is what I'm going to chase. And also being optimistic. Often we struggle with that. I am naturally someone that I'm optimistic by nature. And a lot of people say to me, but are you never like sad? Or, of course I am. Of course I am. But I know I have a duty with others. I have a duty with my younger generation. I am not going to show you the bad and the ugly. I need to come across as optimistic as possible. I need to give you the reality of, this is what life looks like. These are the challenges that you're going to face in a professional life, but have a positive lens in life, because negativity takes us nowhere. And I think we all know that. So in essence, it's a combination of things. It could be, in summary, right? It could be a lot of limiting self-beliefs. It could be down to your own personality, right? It could be down to how you were raised, your social condition, your social environment. Could be your childhood experience. Could be because we all have different cultures within the African culture. We have different cultures in any other kind of cultures that is non-African. So all those things, they form the basis of the imposter syndrome kicking in every time you are winning, every time you are succeeding, every time you have an amazing role, every time you are given a new position that is quite high and you're saying, will I be able to do this? Right? Every time you enter a room and you're thinking, why am I here? Do I belong here? And I'll close this particular slide with one example. I was at the drinks yesterday in my firm, my bank. My CEO was there. So I was looking the room. There was a lot of managing directors and the CEO was there. There was a lot of senior people. And I immediately started looking. I was like, oh my God, I am the only third Black person in the room. Female. The other two were male. And I was like, why am I here? That was my imposter syndrome kicking in. But I kicked it back. And I said to myself, I belong here, right? Because I'm a strong performer, because I'm a strong leader in the bank, and someone invited me to be in the room in an event that was a closed event for a limited number of people. So I say this to say, what we all in our day-to-day lives experience this. We might not give it a name, we might not recognize it, but we have it kicking in. It's a voice that we need to be able to control or kick it back and talk to that voice and say, I am better than you are. Okay, I'm going to pause for any thoughts, reflections, questions on this particular slide. Anyone? I'm trying to get rid of this thing.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so earlier when you were saying to Cornelia that did you give it a name? Don't you think that when we don't give things a name, we don't exaggerate, we just let them go easily? She said that she felt angry and then she will learn how to deal with her emotions and just let it go. And also, like when you are feeling sad and some people will start saying that I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling that I have depression, and they are just sad for a moment and they can, yeah. So what do you think?
So if I understood your point correctly, your question is, should we give it a name or we shouldn't give it a name? Just help me
Yeah.
understand the question, that we shouldn't give it a name.
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason why I asked Cornelia that question of did you give it a name was to try and understand whether she recognizes the sentiment. You don't have to give it a name,
Yeah.
right? It's more about recognizing that you have that feeling and how do you go about it. Being angry about something and letting go is one way of dealing with it, as long as you don't revisit that feeling. But the reason why imposter syndrome is so prevalent is because sometimes we don't tackle them. We don't deal with them. So it will come back. So for Cornelia's example, right, for Cornelia's case, that feeling will come back unless she decides to deal with it, right? And recognizing it. She can call it whatever she is. I called it so many names in the past 10 minutes, right? I called it a bullying voice. I called it a sentiment. I called it a non-medical condition. And the world calls it imposter syndrome, right? But it's that notion of, I'm feeling this. So my thing with saying that to Cornelia, did you give it a name, was to try and understand, did she recognize that this is what the world call imposter syndrome? And does she have techniques to deal with them? Because they will happen again and again and again. It's just who wins that battle, right? And I'll tell you something that can be quite interesting is oftentimes the high performers are the ones that have this feeling. And I've seen that in my world, where people that are extremely educated, several degrees, they have masterclass, PhD, they're very, very adequate, but they feel inadequate. And the ones that are not, they don't have any of those accolades, they don't have those experiences, are the ones that are feeling like, I belong in this room, right? So that's why I was asking that question, just to provoke the conversation, just to open the dialogue. I hope that helps.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for the question. Any other thoughts or comments? Does anyone have this feeling other than myself and Cornelia?
Hi, Sonia. It's Wendy again.
Hey, welcome back.
Yes, suffer from it greatly. And I think to comment on what was just said, for me, the pivotal point is identifying it and either succumbing to it or pushing it back. So when it's happening and you identify it, are you going to succumb and say, yes, I shouldn't be here. Let me just shrink, keep quiet, become a wallflower.
Right.
Or do I push it back and actually find my voice at my space and acknowledge that I am here for a reason, and let me find my voice while I am here. So for me, it's identifying that pivotal point, and then what do you do?
And
really takes you to the next.
Do you remember? Again, I don't want to use you as the example again, but last week in our session on personal brand, it was the perfect example of someone that has these feelings and it might not be apparent to you, right? And I think we were exchanging messages and we were talking about this. Oftentimes, these are people that are extremely capable, but then have these fears and that voice kicking in, right? There are ways of dealing with it. And like I said, for me, and in my own experience, I face this constantly. I'll share. So I have a new job in my bank, which is a more senior role, more exposure, etc. And in the meeting yesterday, a lot of the big people were there, the big bosses. And when they're talking about it, it's like, Sonia, oh my God, we can't wait for you to start your new role. I immediately started feeling, oh my God, will I be able to meet their expectations? There'll be a lot of eyes on me. And then what I had to do was I literally had to breathe. And I said to myself, they gave me the role because they believe in me. They trust me to do a good job. So, yes, I'll be fine. So for a couple of seconds, I had that thought and I had that feeling. And I had to literally remind myself that because I'm good enough, because I am supposedly I'm giving this role because they looked at my record, my track record, and they said, okay, we're going to give this girl a chance, right? And that's how I had to fight that voice. And it's a constant battle. I'll tell you that for a fact. It's not something that I'm going to give you some tips today and next time it happens, that's it, you're done, it's never going to happen again. It will. In different instances in our lives. It could even be something like, I don't know, something as simple as you going to a concert, right? And one of your favorite actors is performing and you don't know the lyrics, but you claim to be a fan of the person's music. I feel that all the time because I don't know the lyrics. I'm not good at remembering all the lyrics. I'll be singing along in my own version. As simple as that. Another prime example, imagine you're hosting a couple of people in your house and you're supposed to be cooking. You cook, but you fear that they're not going to like your cooking. You fear that, oh my God, my cooking is not good. Meanwhile, they're all congratulating you and saying, this is amazing. Oh, wow, what a best, whatever you cooked, right? And this is a simple thing as cooking or going to a concert, being a fan of someone. And I know it's a basic example, but I just want to use it to tell you that the imposter syndrome, as we call it, that feeling of fraud, of being discovered, is very real in different aspects of our lives. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts, reflections before we move on? I don't know how to get rid of this panel here. Prince, are you able to remove this panel from here? Have we lost Prince?
I think Prince is not here.
Okay, fine. Oh, it's disappeared now. Okay.
Okay.
Okie dokie. I don't know what happened there. So we'll talk about the impact on our personal and professional life. And I think the one thing that for me happens all the time is that there's battle with the imposter syndrome. It does take a toll on our well-being, and it can cause a lot of emotional fatigue, right? Because you're constantly battling your thoughts. You're battling the bully, that bully voice of yours that pops up every now and then. So it does take an emotional toll on you and cause that fatigue. It also, and I'm mixing it with personal and professional life because it happens all the time. There's this task procrastination because you fear that they will judge you. They'll say, this is not good. You are not good enough. You shouldn't be here. You don't belong here, right? And also you have this feeling of needing an approval to do something. Prime example, I launched the initiative over a year ago. And before launching it, I was thinking to myself, I think there's other initiatives that are similar to mine. I think there's already a market for this. There's already a lot of, initiatives in the market. So there might not be a market for this initiative that I'm launching. It could be replicating something. I had to convince myself that I can find my niche, right? And my niche was finding an opportunity in this new initiative, which was tailor it to Portuguese speaking people and countries in essence. So that was my niche, right? Combining my experience in my professional world with the educational aspects that I gained through my work and through my formal education, and then adding the Portuguese there as a language. So that was me finding my niche, and I didn't need that approval to go ahead and launch it. So often we have that, right? I need to have the external validation and approval to go ahead with something. On top of the initiative, I also published my first book last year. And for a number of years, I've written this book ages ago. I was like 18, 19. Excuse me, and I never launched the book because I felt published rather the book because I felt that my English wasn't good enough. So I had to literally convince myself, oh my God, I think my English is okay. What am I going to do if people say this is rubbish, it's not good? Again, I had to talk to myself and my husband and a couple of friends that told me, this is good material, Sonia, and the English is perfect because you write English, you studied in English, and there's nothing wrong with your English. But again, that sense of needing an approval and external validation was kicking in. That's what we call imposter syndrome, right? That feeling that keeps on kicking in every time you're about to do something great, every time you're about to put yourself in a position of dealing and fighting your fears. I also feel like a lot of times the big impact that this sentiment, this feeling has on us is to do with the trust that we have in our capabilities and the trust that others have in us. If you don't see yourself as amazing and capable of doing X, Y, Z, people will see through, right? So it starts with you. So that sentiment, that bully voice that kicks in, they will stop you from trusting in your gut, trusting your capabilities, trusting your gut instinct, trust that people have in you, that you can deliver on something, right? So it is very real what this feeling does to people, because you are constantly trying to fight it and make sure that your presence is heard, whether on a professional level or on a personal standpoint. It affects your relationships, right? It creates a lot of self-doubt. And if you think about the people that are relating with you or have relationships with you, they will see that, right? And sometimes it could be a struggle to deal with you if you don't deal with yourself first in terms of your emotions and things of that nature. So that doubt is always impacting you in terms of your relationships, as well as, personal as well as your professional relationships. Another prime example, when I started my career, I was always scared to reach out to senior people and ask them for advice and ask them to mentor me, until one day I was like, do you know what? And that one day took a while to come. What's going to happen? What's the worst that can happen? I'll probably get a no, or I'll probably get, I don't know, silence. They're not going to answer, which means that is the no, right? So I just one day decided that, you know what, I will do that. And I emailed someone that I admired, pretty senior, and the person responded. And that was it. That's all I needed. My confidence was through the roof because I got that one response. But what was that? The imposter syndrome was kicking in, making me doubt myself, making me think that, oh my God, I'm not going to be, what's the word? I am not good enough, to the point that this person would think that they can even have a relationship with me, in a sense that I'm going to be their mentor, I'm going to guide them. So it was a battle that I had to fight. And I just tried one day and it worked, right? So there's a lot of tangible things that we can do that will help us fight that sentiment or that feeling. And at work, even at a personal level, but at work, you can have a burnout, and it's very real at the moment. We're dealing with that at work for different reasons, pandemic being one of them. But when you're constantly fighting yourself, and I said to you, right, it causes a lot of emotional fatigue. When you're constantly fighting yourself, that can cause you to then look at work and your remit and whatever your job is. Oh, I had enough of this. And maybe you start looking for another way out, right? So that feeling of an emotional battle that causes fatigue can also cause burnout at work. And last but not least, I don't know if you remember, I mentioned anxiety and depression being causes of the imposter syndrome, or could be causes of it. They are also an impact, right? The constant emotional fatigue, the constant battle, emotional battle, the burnout, and the constant trying to need to get validated by someone or something can cause that you live in an anxiety mode at all times, right? And depression, like I said, is a real feeling. For Women by Women, we have someone that's a psychologist, and she focuses a lot on these topics, anxiety and depression. And she says that a lot of times the imposter syndrome is one of the reasons why people fall into that, constantly living in an anxious mode. They're always anxious. And again, a lot of times, confirmed by this psychologist, is due to people being high performers. They constantly feel like they need to deliver more and more, or that they don't belong in that role that they have, or they shouldn't be in the meeting with senior people, right? Because of that feeling, that battle. So anxiety and depression are real medical conditions that can happen and be triggered by the imposter syndrome. I'll pause here for thoughts or reflections, or any sort of questions that you might have. Or has anyone experienced any of these? Have you been in a position where you felt that you were emotionally fatigued because you're trying to get validation from someone, or some of your bosses, or some of your friends, or whatever the case may be? Come on, anyone? No one?
Yes, Sonia.
So tell me, let's just talk a little bit. So have you ever felt any of these sentiments?
I never actually identified it. My daughter said to me, because I kept on yawning, I'm like, I'm tired. Why am I tired? What's wrong with me?
Right.
I shouldn't be tired. I've got no actual reason to feel this tired.
Right.
You know, I'm usually a very energetic person. I sleep very little. So I was actually sleeping an extra hour too. So why should I be this tired? And she said, stress, Mom. I'm like, what am I stressed? What do you mean stress? She says, stress can exhaust you.
That's right.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I had to take inventory, and I realized that the imposter syndrome really had led to this emotional fatigue, because as you say, it's a constant battle. You know, every week I had to go to a meeting. Every week I'm sitting in a meeting. Should I speak? Shouldn't I speak? I don't want to say something ridiculous. What I say is going to be recorded. Say something valuable.
Yeah.
And you don't realize how taxing it is on you. And what was my eldest daughter, and funny enough, we were talking about it this past year, because when she was 3, 4, she was assessed because she finished the school curriculum at that age already. And the school sent on to an educational psychologist for an assessment, identified high IQ, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
But for some other reason, I never told her, because I was addressing her, the principal, you know, the school, and eventually homeschooled her, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And a few years back, I did have an IQ test. I'm like, yeah, I did. I never mentioned it. Why do you think I've been working so hard with you all these years?
Right.
I said to her, do you want to know what it is? Do you want me to get it for you? So she said, actually, no. And I said, why? She said, it can be bad from both perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
In that I would put pressure on myself to achieve, to perform to that number. And I'd be constantly worrying that, am I performing to that number that's been assigned to me? And I said, well, it's good that I didn't even mention it to you. So let's just leave it.
Yeah.
You have been performing so outstandingly for years. Let's just leave it at that, you know, and just the past 5 years has really been her journey to accept herself and to move away from that.
Yeah.
Because when she got one wrong on a maths test, it was like, oh my gosh, you're not that bright. You know, you got 99%. What happened to the one?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
And it's the pressure that we put on ourselves, right?
Yeah, which almost led to horrible path with depression, and could have ended up. And she always says to me, because I've been homeschooling her for the past 5 years, you know, the risk to her life, she always says to me, Mom, you don't understand the rest of my actual life if I'd stayed there. Is it really that bad at schools right now?
Yeah.
And she said, yes, it is. And I mean, I think the testimony that we've had a 45% increase in anxiety and depression in teens is testimony to this constant need to perform.
Right.
As I was looking at your list of causes, I was like, it really is everywhere. If I look at myself, if I look at my children, the people around me, I could easily identify every one of those points.
Yeah.
And it is constant, this constant need of, am I good enough? Did I do enough? For me as a mom, it is really constant. With both of my kids being identified as gifted. Am I giving them enough? Should I have done it this way? Should I have done it? And you only know after the fact.
Yeah.
No,
I'll tell you, I think I shared last week, when I moved from London to New York, I moved before my family. So my son stayed behind just for a few months, I think 3 months. And I was going back and forth, New York to London, a lot of hours. And I missed his first day of kindergarten. And I was feeling horrible with myself. And I had to write a letter to him. I wrote a letter, which actually I blogged about it. And I said, when he's old enough, he will read it so that he understands why Mommy missed his first day. And guess what? I wrote the letter because I was being hard on myself. My husband was there. My parents were there, right? Of course, I want to be there. And then I had a lot of my other friends saying to me, but Sonia, it's okay, because that is one moment in his life. There'll be a lot more that you will celebrate. And I couldn't get hold of that feeling of, I should have been a better mom to my son. I should have been there for him. I was only like, 3, right? Because in the UK, they were calling it kindergarten. But it was just like, oh my God, this wasn't a big deal for most people. But for me, it was, because I felt that I was failing him. So again, this is in my personal life, because I was being so hard on myself, right? So I say this to say what? The letter that I wrote was a way of me dealing with that sentiment of failure, of not being a good mom because I missed one event in my child's life, and then giving him the letter. I will give him the letter to read. He can read now, right? I'll give him the letter to read so that he can understand why I did that, right? So we are constantly doing this to ourselves by thinking and saying to ourselves, I'm not good enough. I recently said to my husband that I'm chasing my career. I'm clearly failing on something. Am I a good mother? Am I a good wife? He was like, of course you are. But I wasn't convinced. I kept on thinking, I'm like, there's something else that I'm doing wrong. I should be doing something a bit better. Or I was saying to my husband, oh my God, I don't cook as much as I used to. I'm not baking anymore. Why? It's okay if you reduce some of your activities in lieu of something else. But it's that constant battle of, I need to be at this standard that I think people are judging me on. And sometimes no one is judging you. No one really cares. We are the ones that put these expectations on ourselves and all these things that we need to do it this way, that way, and we need to achieve it by this particular time frame, right? So those are the battles that I think we have to talk about them openly. We have to acknowledge them. We have to recognize them, and we have to then deal with them. And having said that, we'll move on to the next slide, which is a couple of strategies and tips that I'll share with you today on how to deal with this feeling of inadequacy. Okay, so I've listed a couple of things that I personally do around dealing with imposter syndrome. Every time that voice kicks in, these are some of the things that I do. One of them, which is what we're doing now, talk openly about your feeling of inadequacy, right? When the pandemic kicked off in 2020, which is a year that we need to write off, I literally was feeling inadequate because I was at home with my son. My husband was still back in London, and I had all these my colleagues at work saying that, oh, I have my, I have this calendar for my kid. They're baking every day or whatever, doing all these amazing. They have like a color coordinated calendar, and I was like, wow, I don't have any of that. I'm just surviving. I'm in a survival mode. I did cook with my son a couple of times, but I didn't cook every day. I didn't bake every day, and it's okay. And I actually wrote a blog, which a lot of our senior leaders in the bank, they endorsed it because they're like, thank you for being so open and transparent. Thank you for not portraying the image that you've got this, right? I had someone write to me saying that, oh my God, Sonia, the way you act, it's like it's a walk in the park for you. I said, it isn't a walk in the park. But when I'm at work, work is my focus. And I'm trying to balance with all these my unpaid roles of being a cook, a cleaner, everything, right? All together, just my son and I, while my husband was back in the UK. And for me, by opening about it, I helped other women come out and say, I am also struggling, right? So that inner voice, that bully voice, that syndrome, imposter syndrome, as we call it, would have we'll give them a run for their money when we openly talk about our struggles with other people. So I opened up about my feeling of inadequacy, and that opened doors for other people. That is one of my biggest tips that I give to people is be transparent. Don't portray the image that you have it all. Don't portray the image that I am winning, I'm a boss lady. All these concepts that to me, it's just Instagram things, as I call them, because rest assured, I am successful, but I'm not succeeding in all areas of my life. I can guarantee you that because there's a fluctuation. Sometimes I'm winning on one side. On the other hand, I might not be winning, right? And I think that is what the importance of this conversation is. It's extremely, extremely important to openly talk about it and say, I don't have it all get together. Some days I'm in my pajamas, some days I'm in my suit, some days I look all amazing, right? So make sure that you are helping others by being open and transparent, and don't create the notion that everything is amazing. Which leads me to the second tip, which is let's deconstruct this idea of perfection because it doesn't exist. And that's what I mean about you're winning, and I feel like I'm winning, but I'm not winning at all levels. And I'm not winning at all areas, right? And I'm not perfect. So a lot of times in seeking perfection, we are killing our own vibe, and we are, delaying delaying hitting our goals, right? We continue to portray this image that I'm only going to start a business when the perfect time comes. I am only going to launch something or publish my book only when the time is right. There is no such thing, right? Start a business with what you have. Start small, scale up. Publish a book. Publish your first one. So at least you get rid of that fear. You fight the fear, you publish it. It might not be perfect, it might not be good, you get criticism, but you've done it. I rather have in my circle of people that have tried it, failed, tried again, failed, and tried as many times as possible, and then they started winning. Then those ones that haven't tried, but they'll give you the amazing tips on how to do it. Meanwhile, they've never done it, right? So let's deconstruct this idea of perfection because it doesn't exist. One of my favorite ones is recognize and celebrate your achievements. We as women, we struggle to recognize the amazing things that we're doing, right? We struggle to say, I have done this. We struggle to say, I've just been promoted to being a director and I'm leading several teams. I've just been asked to move from London to New York. We struggle to talk about these things. Meanwhile, there's someone admiring us. Meanwhile, there's someone emulating some of our behaviors. There's someone wanting to be like us. There's someone that are picking our tips and strategy, writing it down and saying, I think I'm going to try this. It worked for Sonia. Maybe it could work for me. right? So let's make sure that we talk about, I'm not talking about bragging, but let's make sure that we share our accomplishments, any goals that we have achieved with others, because that lived experience can help someone else. And there's nothing wrong with that. So once we start sharing those things, that helps you fight that bullying voice, that's imposter syndrome that will be saying, "Ooh, you're not good enough." So once you start saying to yourself, wait a minute, I published a book, I launched an initiative, I'm a director at a big bank, I have teams that I'm leading, I have blogs that are being read, I've been invited to do gigs, I run master classes. I think I'm okay. So those are the reminders that I give to myself when I list all my accomplishments, right? So that's the huge tip that I will give and share with you that I try constantly. Every time I have doubts, I list all my things. I'm like, wow, you actually did all of this? Okay, keep going, right? The other thing that is very, very key, do not compare yourselves with anyone, let alone compare yourselves to your peers. Sonia's time is very different to Cornelia's or Wendy or Prince or whoever, right? My time is my time to do this, to achieve this. So if you are in a situation where you feel like, I should have achieved such and such by now, I should have had a baby, I should have had a family by now, stop that. Those comparisons are the worst thing that can happen. And those are the things that the imposter syndrome loves, because you are doubting yourself, you are comparing yourself to others. So I would say stop those comparisons, because that is half of the problem solved, right? Because you are not comparing yourself to someone else's timeline, because they could be lucky. They might not have what you have, but they just been lucky, right? And I say that with a pinch of salt, because sometimes luck is seen as oh my God, this person is lucky, but you don't know how hard they've been working in the background. So sometimes we just attribute someone's success to being lucky, but it's not necessarily that. But my tip is for sure to avoid those comparisons. And last but not least, I'll say, recognize the feedback is very important and very key, but have a triage, have filters for those feedbacks. And I think I mentioned that a couple of minutes ago. I rather have in my circle of friends people that have tried and failed many, many times than people that have not tried anything, but that are giving the perfect tips and saying, this is how you should do it, just because they read somewhere or they read a book or they saw some video and they're telling you what to do. Meanwhile, they have no experience whatsoever. They have no track record. So that is the prime example of filter, right? Get the feedback, but filter it. Personal level as well as professional level. At work, my feedback, when I get feedback, I'm like, okay, who did I get the feedback from? Is it a COO? Is it a director? Is it someone that is quite senior? Okay, yeah. And then is there any truth to that feedback? That's sort of the methodology that I go through when I get feedback from someone on anything. Could be a project, could be whatever the case may be. So create that sort of a triage methodology whereby you filter the feedback, because some feedback are disguised as constructive, but they're actually negative, and they'll have a negative impact on you. So make sure you recognize in your board of advisors, in your circle of friends, in the people that you trust, the feedback, make sure that it's coming from those people that have, what's the word? That have experienced it, in essence, right? People that have done the walk, not people that haven't done it, but they felt like, I can have a say, because everyone has an opinion. So in conclusion, use the different tips that I listed here. The one that I will say stands out for me, I always use, is recognizing and celebrating your achievements, because often women, we don't do that. And I think the new generation does that much better. The millennials, or after the millennials, which I don't know what it is Gen Z, they do that well. Even when they're not winning, even if they're not achieving anything amazing, they will say, hey, I've done this. this is amazing. I am winning. Portraying that image. They do it pretty well. That's called good personal brand. But in essence, I would say recognize where you are in your journey, recognize what are your naysayers, what are the hiccups, and deal with them. Make sure that you surround yourself with people that would help you deal with the imposter syndrome when it kicks in, as opposed to those that will reiterate the fears that you have, because that is not a good strategy whatsoever. So I'll pause here. I thank you for your contributions. I thank you for openly sharing a little bit about yourselves and your experiences. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now. Anything from anyone?
Hi, Sonia. It was so interesting. On your last slide, as you were talking, something struck me, and it was really everything centered around respecting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you took each point and you tied it back to self-respect,
Yeah.
talking about your fears, respecting yourself enough to identify them and address them, seek help for them, deconstructing your idea of perfection.
Mm-hmm.
It's respecting yourself, recognizing and celebrating your achievements, also respecting yourself, not comparing.
Yeah.
Respect yourself.
Yeah.
Filtering feedback, being cautious about who's speaking to you. Do they have your best interest at heart? Are they actually trying to help you?
Mm-hmm.
Self-respect. And it all just, I actually drew self-respect and made a mind map of all of those things. It all centers around that. And deconstructing the idea of perfection has been a huge thing that we've been addressing in the homeschool community with parents, especially with COVID, them finding themselves at home with a child. As you said, I saw this beautiful chart and look at all of these things, and my child is going to be left behind. My child is going to be left behind. My child is behind. My child is losing out. My child is losing out. I don't do 5 things a day and an experiment and a cooking and a learning and every day. What's happening to my child? My child's going to fall behind.
Yeah.
Behind what became our question. Behind who?
Yeah.
And my experience with my youngest was so eye-opening for me this past 2 years, because we adopted the self-directed education approach. And that means no curriculum, no timetable, you just, whatever you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And how far ahead she went when we just relaxed and enjoyed.
Yeah.
And some days, if it's raining, we literally just sat in bed and read books, and it's this constant comparison. And as you say, am I doing enough?
Yeah.
Enough for who? Needs to be the question, I think, especially with COVID. There's been so much talk about getting back to normal.
Yeah.
What normal? Was normal good?
There's
Was
not even,
normal healthy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Really take the time out to ask those questions. As I said,
I think for me, I think for me, it is literally, I summarize it as know yourself, right? I agree with you. It is self-respect, but it's knowing yourself. In knowing yourself, there is so much that you will let in, right? In your life, whether professional or personal life. But if you don't know yourself, anything that pops up and shines, it's okay and is good, right? And I think the pandemic has definitely did us a favor, in a sense that it made us all pause and recognize where we are in our own journeys. A lot of people found happiness in doing different things and they quit their jobs, for example, right? A lot of people found the courage to leave relationships. A lot of people found the courage to leave jobs and set up businesses, right? I think ultimately, to your point, if you do not self-respect yourself, forget it. Anything that pops up, you'll be okay with it, right? You'll be okay with it. Those comparisons for me are a massive killer. They're a massive killer. I, for once, since I was a youngster, I'd never did that. And again, I'll share something quite personal. My sister had a kid before me. Meanwhile, she's younger. And there was a lot of pressure on me. When are you going to get married? When are you going to have a kid? And I didn't let that consume me. But again, because I knew myself and I knew what I wanted to do. And I had my goals from a young age, I was very specific in the things I wanted to do. So I didn't allow society to determine when I was going to get married, when I was going to have a kid, and so on and so forth. And it's a simple thing about life, right? I'm not even talking about my career. But if you don't know yourself, it becomes a struggle. It becomes a real struggle, and others will determine that for you. And then it could be late for you to change that, right? Because it could be that you get to a point in your life that you're like, I can't be bothered. Why change? Why go through that, right? But I 100% agree with you. Yeah, self-respect. You would think that it's something that comes natural to people, right? But hey,
it doesn't.
It doesn't.
I'm so glad you ladies are picking up on this, because I always say, when you deal with me, myself, and I, and you know where you're at, you know where to go.
Yeah.
And I like where you touched on, some people have just their luck. And there's a lot of people who don't understand that.
Yeah.
And they want to crush you, because it's not part of your journey. Yeah. And I was at a stage as well in the beginning of the pandemic where my calendar was full, and I thought this is some kind of bad joke when the pandemic came.
Yeah.
And I questioned God all the time. And one day I was standing in my room. I said, God, I'm going to just leave you alone. I'm going to stop talking to you right now. Your timing is not my timing. Let's see what happens. And believe you me, my life turned around 360 degrees. Because I believed that his timing was not my timing.
Right.
And I moved on. And when you see what Prince and I have done on this crazy app, that was my process that I had to go through. That was my process to prepare. I never knew that a young man like Prince was going to walk into my life from nowhere, walking into my room and asking for help.
Right.
We all have to learn that our timing sometimes is not God's timing.
Yeah.
And we must stop comparing ourselves with the other person.
Right.
Have only competition with yourself, no one else.
That's right.
And just do you, no one else.
Spot on.
Don't die as a copy, Just
copies don't last.
Yeah, copies don't last. Be your own original. So Sylvia,
and be your own fan.
Yeah, be your own fan.
Right.
And celebrate, even if it's small little wins.
Right.
Celebrate yourself and stop sabotaging yourself and standing in your own way. And this is such a message that was preached this week in my club as well. So you just gave a double dash on it this Saturday morning. So we are all in the right alignment. Thank you so much for
amen to that.
So I think it was meant that I am here today as well. Very much.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, Cornelia. I think that was a powerful testament. And I'm a believer as well, and I'm with you on that one. Oftentimes we're in such a hurry and we think that by knocking on his door, he's going to do it in our, because, I need you to do it now. He will do it in his own time when he feels that you're ready. Right. And last week I said something which was around the lines of oftentimes we're not ready for the blessings, or we are blocking the blessings because we expect it to be in a nice package with a nice ribbon. right? And we then miss the blessing because, you know, it's our own limiting self-beliefs. But I had a great time in this session. I don't know if there are any other thoughts or comments before we close. I don't know if Mr. Prince is still around or if he's busy. I haven't seen him very much. Any further comments or thoughts from anyone before we close? Okay. Right. Thank you for your participation. I think this was great, and I think we should continue to do what we just did, the sharing of our lived experiences, because it can help one person, no matter, you know, no matter what we do for the rest of our lives. If we impact one person, we've done our part. Zineb, sorry, I saw you unmuting. Would you like to say something?
I would just like to thank you on behalf of Prince and the others. So next time we will talk about resilience, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll do resilience next week, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.